Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. First of all, I am truly very excited because this time I dedicated myself to do at least one portrait. These ones are very small, about 5 by 4, could be a little less, but they're very fun to make. I think that by doing like small pieces of work, you get or you take the advantage of doing things that are not too complicated, and it allows you to practice and at the same time kind of sort of just gives you, like, for me it's about speed, and I get more time to do other things, specifically when I'm like I need to do errands, etc., etc. But anyways, I wanted to show you guys how I did this and how I created this portrait. This is very simple, which I think that that's the part that I really liked. Um, some people don't like it. I do. This is to wet the entire piece of paper. First of all, before I go on to explain, this paper is about 5 by 4, which is like a card, and they're very thin. They're not too they're not too thick. So what I did is that I got the trio, which is like my go-to, yellow ochre, some permanent rose, and a very very tiny bit of purple, very tiny, just sort of like to give it a nice coat with my first layer. And what you see here is actually I was blowing up um, the colors so it can dry faster. So that's what you see here. And I'm going to get some pink mather all over her cheeks. And what this does is actually that makes the subject to look a little bit more young or younger. And it helps you also with the less bony parts of the portrait, which is like the cheeks, the chin, you know, nose, where you have the cartilage basically also. So I spread it across the nose, on the lips, and that will be my first layer. I prefer to work in layers because I feel like that gives you an advantage to also lift, and I do lift a lot, not on this paper, not this time, but when I'm doing like big artworks, I do throw in a lot of water, and I do like to lift, so working this way allows you to lift and to correct any mistakes because that's the whole point. Basically, a little bit more versatile. I did, and I add the same pink mather or rose into the neck, and I spread it across all the way to what appears to be the chest because I couldn't fit it. I couldn't fit the entire portrait on the card, but you get the idea on how to do these things. Then I added a tiny bit of blue, that's Peruvian blue, and I also lift it. I know sometimes it's like, well, you adding the blue and then you're lifting, but the whole point is to have at least a wash or a tint underneath that kind of just prepares the ground to other colors, and that's what we're doing here. And I also added blue on every single shadow that you could think of. In the beginning, when I was like first starting off, I think blue was my go-to for every single shadow. Now I really like to add black and other colors in it, or kind of just make a mud of it and then add that as my shadow depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes when you're doing things like portraiture or when you're doing things from life, then it becomes a little bit more easier to catch the color of the shadow. Like in this case, it's difficult because it's a flat surface, which I'm actually doing the portrait from. It's not like I'm not doing it from life, it's from a picture. That's what I meant. So that's what you see here. And I'm spreading that purple all over, and then I had the idea of actually doing her hair the same color, not to complicate myself and just to use the same colors all over again, and to add more water onto it and less water depending on what I'm doing. So for the shadows, I added the same purple. I really like that purple from Kuretake, and that's what I'm doing on her lips and also underneath her chin. I wanted something that could cover every single dark spot that I can possibly think on a portrait, and I also added purple for her hair. I wanted to do this a little bit more, I don't know, like more fantasy like, even though it is an actual real human being. I wanted to just add really weird colors and something that is not seen on most of my portraits, because I tend to be a little bit more onto the traditional side, and the person really doesn't have that type of hair color. Just wanted to have something and create something fun and youthful, and I thought that was a good idea on adding purple everywhere that I could think of, including her hair. And this goes along with her eyes. I also added purple on her different parts of her hair, and or her hair basically. And I also added droplets of alcohol, which you probably see in about a minute. I think the most difficult part, and I think that's for everybody that works with watercolors, is that they take a little bit more to dry, and that's the part that frustrates some of us. So what you see me doing here, or what I just did, was that I added rubbing alcohol or alcohol onto the hair. I wanted something to have texture at the same time. I think alcohol does that. For watercolors, of course, I feel like that's my preference. You don't have to use it. I really like the effect that does. I used to have an issue with the supposedly broccoli effect, and I actually like watercolors when they have like those imperfections. It just makes it more beautiful to me. My preference is to be a little less tight and more loose when I'm painting, and allowing you to have like spots here and there and splashes. It just makes me happier than having a complete perfect portrait. I don't know, but that's the way. I fought so much with perfectionism on my earlier days that I literally kind of just embrace imperfections, and I love the feeling of texture and different splatters here and there on watercolors. It just makes it more original to me. Of course, that's my opinion. So once I did the hair, I continue adding purple all over, because this is kind of like what I wanted to do. So what you see underneath is adding a thin layer of, I believe is sepia, brown sepia, and it's a almost like in every other brand it's the same name, except I think is one watercolor that I was like, this isn't this the same? And it was Indian red. It's the same color, sepia, and I really like that burnt amber. Once it's like really toasty brown on the skin, it makes it much different. So what I'm going to do with that color is that I'm going to add it in different places of the portrait, and I'm going to spread it all over. Remember, when you have like a layer down, or you put a layer down in watercolors, what other layers that are overlapping, they're going to take on the color that was underneath it. So you have to take that into consideration when you're adding the watercolor on top of the first layer. I think that's what's going to help you develop shadow and develop skin tone as well. And I learned that when it comes to skin tones, you really can like put down like, this is just one color for this skin color for this type of skin tone. You can do a little bit more darker by adding bluish and green to the same mixture that I just created here. And you shouldn't limit yourself on just using three colors and make all the skins with that same three colors. You can actually mix it in with all the colors of the palette and create your own beautiful skin tones. I think that makes it more juicy and more pretty, in my opinion, of course. Once that layer is dry, I'm going to go onto and create another darker layer to also kind of just add the shadows. Someone a long time ago asked me, like, when you're creating watercolors, I really enjoyed how to do this portrait. Unfortunately, the first recording that I was doing, it actually stopped, so I had to redo it again, and this is what I'm trying to do. I think it erased too much, but we'll try to figure it out. So what you're doing and what I'm doing here, it was like what I see her doing, is that I'm adding that sienna all over. That makes it more skin tone, and that will be my second layer. I was actually talking about, I don't know who asked me about how many layers do you need to to make it complete, or for the watercolor to look complete. And I think that for this one is about 3, but sometimes you can add as many layers as you like. And I also wanted to show that you don't need like a bunch of colors to finish or to do something that it seems complicated. I feel like the best way to go at it is to not look for lines in the face, or just try to basically just paint over it. In the beginning, I wanted to leave the ears off, but I felt like it was better to just not complicate myself with it. I did left a little bit over there with the ear, but it doesn't affect the painting. I don't know why I didn't finish the ear. I didn't notice it until now. So here it goes. Hair is the same way. You go with the parts that have the shadow, and then you add shadow to the folds of the hair, and that's what you see here. And you can practice along with hair with different strands and different types of hair. Every time I stop the video is because I think that my son was asking questions about certain things, so that's what you see here. I think it's very difficult to explain what you do because you're not really concentrating in technical stuff when you're painting, you're just doing. But I'm going to try my best to explain to you why there's this color on top of what. One of the things that I did notice is that I wanted to create was like a monochrome portrait since the beginning. And so what I did is that I created those 3 layers, and on top of the layers I added that purple in a very light wash, and I kind of just closed in the eyes, and I closed in the end of the eyes. So basically the main focus was the end corner of the eye, not really to create the eye itself. Also, the iris of the eye is purple, and I'm going to drag the same purple all the way down to the neck on top of that sepia that we already have there. Creates this really nice shadow color. You don't have to mimic too much shadow because the purple kind of just serves 2 purposes, which is layer and also shadow. So what you see here is I'm going to start the lips, and I wanted to do a little bit more tight. Like we could do like just like the little ripples I have, the lips have, but The brush was too big, and I said forget it, I'm just gonna just keep it moving, because I don't know what it is when you're doing small things, you don't complicate yourself as much as when you're doing like big portraits. So I just wanted to paint and enjoy it. Since I don't have much time to do it, I think that taking advantage of the time that I do have, I feel like that's a major privilege for me. So the first layer of the lip was that pink color, and then to that, on top of it, I added that purple. For the portrait, I wanted to convey something or someone very young, and I'm really enjoying when I go onto Pinterest or Instagram. I enjoy those really nice pictures of the girls with the only eyeshadow on the tip of the nose and on her eyes only, like on the bottom part. For some reason, I find it very interesting and very artistic. So I wanted to do the same thing with this model here. Even though the person has different hair and different type of color, I changed all that because I was like thinking about, I don't know what it's called, but I was thinking about those models that they like those type of makeup, and I was like, this is perfect to create that kind of like that eyeshadow look when it comes to all the way to the tip of the nose and the cheeks, and also on the um on the eyes, which is weird, but I like it. It's like a mask. I love it. We're gonna add blue in each corner of the eye. We're gonna add blue on her mouth, and we're going to add blue and use it as a shadow on different parts of her face. I think that will help with the composition of the portrait as well. And that's what you're going to see it done in a couple or a few minutes. I wanted to take this time to explain the only thing that I was missing, and I felt like I kind of just cheated, and I'm truly sorry. I completely disregard that part, is that I didn't record how to do the drawing. I think, in my humble opinion, that drawing is a very important part in watercolors. Think of it as the skeleton of watercolors. So I feel like once you get to know how to draw, to concentrate more on the drawing than the actual watercolors. I think that once you get that part completed, or at least assimilated, then you can add the color after. I think, in my humble opinion, of course, that's very important. The drawing part that makes it basically the skeleton of what you're creating. I will have been completely off if the drawing wasn't precise, because watercolor, that's how you're going to know where the lights are. That's for the eyelashes. For the eyebrows, I use black, and you can see that underneath you can see the pencil marks. The pencil that I usually use is a mechanic pencil, and I have, not we, but I have the the other parts, like the little tips of them. I have a bunch of them because I feel like for me it's easier to draw with a mechanical pencil than use a regular pencil. I just like to use a mechanical pencil, but you should get used to both when you're learning. Right now that you are looking at the portrait from this angle, and you can see the eyes, you can see where the light is and what we focused on, which is not so much on the eye itself, or more so on the outside corner or the outer corner of the eye. When this part was done, I didn't like it, so changed it a bit and made it a little bit more watery. And of course, when you do that, it makes it look like the portrait is actually crying, but I like the feeling of messy, again, imperfection, perfect. I like the look of watery instead of just creating something tight, even though the shadow and the markings of the lights are actually tight and you can see where. If you would like to learn how to create watercolors, even though if like you're actually using a picture, but you want to create a watercolor using lights and shadow, I always tell people to squint their eyes and to stand back. When you squint one eye or you squint both eyes, you are able to see where the light and the shadow can belong, and it makes it easier. So for practice, you can stand back on your portrait and say, if I use this shadow on this side, will it look better or not? And that's how I kind of just create a shadow when I'm using portraits that don't have an actual shadow. For the iris, I also use the purple color, and that's what you see me doing there. Remember that the portrait itself is completely covered in paint. There's a thing about leaving the white part of the paper, for me, that I used to do, not anymore, but you can definitely do that. On purpose, I leave the white, but if I could cover it with paint, I'll do it. So basically, that tint, the first tint that you might use for your watercolor, that's what it appears to look white, but is actually being painted on. On overall, I hope that you enjoy watching this portrait, that you learn something. I do not mind if you take this as your practice portrait and redo portraits yourself that look like mine. I actually took this model from, I don't remember if it was Instagram or Pinterest. One of those two I actually did the model from. And I enjoy painting people. They might not look exactly like the model because of obvious reasons, but you can definitely use, I don't mind it at all. What I did for the background is that I was thinking, I don't know what to do for the background color, so I actually use gold from Kuretake, which is pretty intense, and I really like to use it on the corners. Because this is a card, I wanted to do it a little bit more aesthetically, and that's what you see me doing there. So every corner of the portrait has some gold into it, which is pretty cool. I used to use schminke, but I'm enjoying the Kuretake as much as the schminke. I think that schminke you have to use a liquid, and I don't remember now. Don't even quote me on it, but using just water with schminke just might not give you that exact gold that you might need. Notice that I use a flat brush for the background because I'm using this really solid color, and you don't have to go too far with it. You can just go around the corners with a flat brush. You don't need to have or do much with it. If it was like a granulated background, then it will be something different. And that's me bending so you can see how the gold look. I don't know if I mentioned it in the beginning. This is with Hand & Hewell watercolor paper 140. And what you see me doing there is adding more golden to finish the portrait. And there you have it. I hope that you enjoy, and I'll see you on the next one. I wanted to time lapse this one, but I know that I haven't posted in a while, so I'll owe you at least some explanation and some time, and it was all worth it. Hope that you are able to paint, and if you have any questions, feel free. That's why I'm here, and I'll try my best to help you with any questions that you might have, and I'll talk to you on the next one.